Nigerians from all walks of life have been expressing diverse shades of opinion on the performance of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is set to mark a second anniversary in office on May 29, 2025, in exactly 4 days from now. Criticism from the opposition side of the nation's democratic space has been particularly strong, perhaps owing to recent developments in the polity, notably the widespread defection of politicians from various political parties into the ruling All Progressives Congress. Those who are pushing this position are convinced there's a tendency towards the acquisition of absolute power by President Tinubu, which they say may not augur well for Nigeria in the long run. In a related development, despite growing concerns about Nigeria's political future, President Bola Tinubu has dismissed fears of a drift towards a one-party state, saying that there is nothing inherently wrong with such a system. He says no one should be blamed for leaving what he described as a sinking ship. At the National Political Summit of the All Progressives Congress in Abuja, all major organs of the party formally endorsed President Bola Tinubu as the sole presidential candidate for the 2027 general election. Speaking at the gathering, Tinubu addressed recent defections from opposition parties, reinforcing the ruling party's growing dominance. The candidate of the Labour Party during the last presidential election, meanwhile, Peter Obi, has dissociated himself from efforts by leaders of the opposition movement in Nigeria to forge a coalition ahead of the 2027 elections. Speaking to a group of young supporters in a 7-minute, 16-second video circulated on Labour Party's WhatsApp on Saturday, Obi stated that he will seek to contest the next election on the platform of the party and accused the ruling APC of fueling the internal crisis in the two main opposition parties in Nigeria, his own Labour Party and the People's Democratic Party, currently being led by former Vice President of Nigeria, Atiku Abubakar. Now, still on politics, the House of Reps was last Thursday divided over a bill seeking to amend the Electoral Act 2022 to make voting compulsory for all Nigerians of voting age in national and state elections. The bill, which passed second reading during the day's plenary session, presided over by Speaker Tajuddin Abbas, was jointly sponsored by the Speaker and Daniel Asama, a lawmaker from Plateau State. The proposed legislation stipulates penalties for eligible voters who fail to vote without valid justification, including a fine of 100,000 naira, a 6-month jail term, or both. When first introduced in mid-April, the bill sparked public outrage, with the National Association of Nigerian Students threatening mass protests in opposition. Senator Shehu Sani is a former national lawmaker who represented Kaduna Central Senatorial District and a one-time governorship aspirant in the state. He joins me now to share his thoughts on those recent developments in the polity. Good to have you on this day live, the Sunday Talk Show, Senator Comrade Shehu Sani. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, Senator Sani, let's start with President Tinubu's midterm scorecard. What's your assessment of how this administration has fared within the last 2 years before the celebrations will begin in 4 days' time? Overall, in terms of the democratic environment, secondly, in terms of sectoral performance, in terms of the scorecard, particularly of the ministers.
Thank you, Ruben, for having me once again in your program. It's been a long time. Well, first of all, like all other governments in the history of Nigeria, in the last 2 years, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration has scored some positive points on a number of areas, and there are problems and challenges in also a number of areas. I come from Kaduna State, which is in the northwestern part of Nigeria. of particular urgent and important interest to us is security. Our region has been faced with banditry and terror attacks for almost over a decade. And specifically in my own state, there are parts of the states that were virtually inaccessible because they have been under the control of bandits. And this has always been the case in Niger, Katsina, Zamfara, parts of Sokoto State, and Kebbi State. And as we know in the past, attacks and kidnapping, specifically on schools, and extortion of ransom was almost a daily or weekly affair. There are still challenges going on now, but I can't remember the last time when we have gotten reports where students were kidnapped and ransom were extorted. If you can remember in my own area state, there was attack on Greenfield University, Bethel Baptist High School, even the Nigerian Defense Academy, Polytechnic in Zaria, and other southern Kaduna were all under attack. But for now, things have calmed down. But that does not mean the security issues are virtually solved, but we can see improvement in that aspect of it. And then secondly, we have seen that the states now have more resources, which of course has been said to be part of the dividend of the rumble of subsidy, which of course Nigerians are suffering as a result of rise in cost of living. So there are clearly an evident allocation of more funds to the states, which we have been seeing in a number of places. But I can say that in security, he has scored a lot, but we still have challenges. And on matters of the economy, people are still paying through their noses, but projects are going on at the state level. And then when you pick on the area of education, we have also seen funding going to the primary and secondary schools level within our own parts of the country. And I can also say that for the first time in the history of Nigeria, we have seen some reforms which were unthinkable. And it has been in the history of any country. No leader should dare initiate or trigger reforms and expect himself to be loved and clapped by all. Reforms comes with price, with consequences, with pains and suffering. And the public view about reforms will change only when it starts bearing fruits. So as far as I'm concerned, the government in a number of areas has achieved, and there are also areas which not much has been achieved, and that is where I can say briefly for now, before the next question.
Yeah, but you also said that there are some other positive areas. Nigerians complain about high cost of living, they complain about insecurity. But what do you think in terms of the performance of the ministers, individually and collectively? After all, in 2023, President Tinubu set up a unit, a policy coordination unit led by Adizabala Usman. And that unit, in terms of service delivery, has been assessing these ministers. But from what you have seen, which minister do you think is performing? Which ministry do you think is just, sleeping?
Well, you see, there are two perspectives to this. I happen to come from a civil society or civil rights background, and I found myself in the realm of politics. As a civil rights activist, I can virtually look at the president and say, fire any minister that is not performing, or fire anyone who is above the age of 65, bring in young people, do this and do that. But on the political realm, things work differently. When you find yourself in the position of power as a president of a country, and you had the task of appointing ministers which constitutionally enable you to do it from all states and then zonal representation in your cabinet, You have to balance between the competence and credibility of the person you are appointing and his also political relevance. If you look at the profile of these ministers, there were ex-governors who were brought into the cabinet. And I'm sure it's not about whether their capacity, their competence, their ability, but because of the role they played in helping, supporting, and gathering votes for the president to come into office. There are also ministers who are appointed based on their own competence and nomination that came from their own very state. So for a president, it's not easy for him to wake up and say that I'm firing this person, I'm firing that person. If you look at it, there are ministers that have performed outstandingly. For example, if you look at the Minister of Works, Umahi, for the first time in the history of Nigeria, we are having a minister who will look at a construction giant that seems to be, for decades, being infallible and can't be challenged, and say, no, you have delayed and I'm firing you. And he's everywhere in all parts of the country. We have a Minister of Health who was appointed not because he was a member of APC, but because he has excelled and established himself globally as a health expert. And you can see the innovation in the areas of health. We have a Minister of Information for the first time, Mohammed Idris, who will speak to the people and will not be said to be lying or emitting or spreading propaganda. He is also doing his best to the best of his ability. A foreign affairs minister that is also reaching out and making Nigeria's presence globally. We have other ministers, that of petroleum and other things. Many of them are doing, but there are still ones that are virtually invisible. And Nigerians had the right to demand that the president access them and do what he wants to do with them. But the fact is that removing a minister may be removing a lead of a grenade in a certain political equation in a state. For example, a minister who is from Jigawa State is a Minister of Defense, and Minister of State for Defense is also from Zamfara State. And you know the political equations in those states now. Okay. And from our own is a Minister of Environment. So in that aspect, I would say that there are ministers that have proven to be worthy of being appointed, and there are ministers whom I believe that even if they have been appointed to settle their political contribution, 2 years is enough for the country to move forward and for him to refresh, reactivate, and reset his cabinet for the task ahead.
Okay, yeah, I see you've named some of the performing ministers. Well, on this table, in another program, some people will mention the Minister of Interior. They will add to it also the Minister of Digital Communication and all of that. They will also add perhaps the Minister of Aviation. But I wanted you to name some of those deadwoods, who are there because of their political relevance.
I think it is better I name the ones that performed than the dead ones. You made mention of Minister of Internal Affairs. I've never seen a young man in the history of Internal Affairs Ministry who has brought so much innovation, where you can come into Nigeria from the airport. You don't need to be asked where you're coming from. The airports are being digitalized. And Festus Keyamo has also proven to be, even though he was an activist without a background in aviation, he has proven to be worthy of being appointed in that position. The digital economy, the Minister of Trade, when I saw her at Davos speaking, I was very proud of her. I've never known who she is. I was so happy that we have someone of that nature in that position. The agriculture, the transportation are also doing their best, but I cannot specifically mention a minister and say this is not. But in defense, we can see the reduction in the attacks on schools. And even though terror groups and terror elements in the Northwest, the Turji, the Paleri, the Kachala, the Boderi, and others are still at large, But I believe that they are also doing their best. As far as who is not performing, is not for me to say. My mouth is too heavy on that, and I think I will leave it for you to be able to help me with such information.
Okay, comrade. But let me ask you, what would you like to see going forward? Because there's this concern that politics has taken over the environment. 2 years to the next general elections, it's all about 2027, 2027, and it's all about coalition politics, and it's all about President Tinubu saying he's expecting more people to defect into the APC. What are your fears? What are your concerns about this latest development?
You see, I'm very much concerned that we are a developing country, and our energy should be more invested in development and economic progress, technology, and so many things. But here we are, our constitution cages to a 4-year term in office. And the way we divide this 4 year is that governance only happens in 1 year. The second year is talking about the election. The third year is conducting the election, and the last year will be handing over after election. So we waste almost more than 70% of a 4-year tenure discussing about the next election. Virtually, a sane country, a stable country, a country that knows its worth, should dedicate almost 3.5 years of the lifespan of its democratic process in its development. The national discourse is not about technology, it's not about infrastructure, it's not about the economy, it's not about the future, it's not about how we can be Indonesia, Malaysia, or Japan. It is about handover, it's about election, it's about campaign, it's about coalition, it's about endorsement. This is where we have found ourselves today. One will have expected after the 2023 elections, everyone will have settled for governance to now know the issues we are going to address our security challenges, educational challenges, health challenges, infrastructural challenges, and rebuild and reconfigure our country for the future. But that's not the case. After the first year in power, the next is about talking about 2027. And the next year, the year after that, we'll be preparing about 2027. And then the last year will be about conducting election for 2027. So virtually, we don't have any space for going on. Where do we go from here? I think it's very important that as a country, that we put in the interests of this country first before our own personal interests. And the only way to go about it is that politicians must see themselves as Nigerians first before they think about their political party, their political affiliation, or wherever they come from. A nation of 230 million people, we don't have much time left to spend so much time in politics. All this struggle, all this craze, all this desperation for political power is not being helpful to this country. And I think it is time for us to, each time election comes to an end, it's time for us to concentrate on governance. And I believe that the people who are talking about the election and the people who are countering those who are talking, they are all overheating the polity. We are now deep in it now. It appears that from next year, there will virtually be no governance. Everything will begin and end with 2027. Primary elections, then general elections, and then before you know it, it will be elections time. So how can a nation that is faced with all these challenges is not making the issues of its challenges the focal points of governance? Rather, what matters much is elections. That is something I virtually can't understand.
Okay, comrade, let me ask you. One other issue is about compulsory voting bill, which was proposed by Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tajuddin Abbas, and which was also supported by another member of the House. And that bill has passed second reading. The argument is that it should be compulsory for Nigerians to vote if you are of voting age, and that if you don't vote, you could be penalized, 6 months imprisonment or 100,000 naira fine, or both. And the argument is that in the countries where they have compulsory voting, Australia, Belgium, Argentina, the voter turnout is 97%. And that if we have compulsory voting in Nigeria, perhaps the problem of voter apathy will be resolved. What do you think? Do you think we have to force the people to vote to ensure proper representation?
You see, I still try to go deep down into research to find out why should our country, people will go and collect PVCs. And when INEC come out with a result, they will say that over 79 million Nigerians have received their own PVCs. And when election time comes, you see Bola Tinubu winning with 8 million, and then Atiku 6-point-something million, and Obi 6-point-something. Then you ask yourself, where are all those people who collected their PVCs? PVCs are not interior decor items. They are not souvenirs. When you go to collect them, you should go and vote leaders who represent you. People need to know that leadership is as important as the life and survival of a nation and a people. Because the people you elect or refuse to elect will determine your life, determine the life of your children, and determine whether you will live or not, because leadership has all these components and levers. So a nation like ours, people have to know you can't be complaining when you don't go to vote. If you look at the statistics of people who voted for Shagari, I think he voted, I don't have to have statistics, but he has about 12 million votes. I don't know I can't remember. But look at 40 years after, or 44 years after, our president here is winning election by 8 million votes. At that time, the population of Nigeria was less than 100 million. Now we have 230 million. Why should people collect PVCs and go and sit down? I do not support a compulsory voting law for all Nigerians, but we should enlighten Nigerians to vote. But forcing them to go and vote will come with a lot of consequences. And then you ask yourself, why are they not going to vote? Apart from the fact that their refusal to vote enabled those who vote or rig elections to put in the person they want. The point is that perhaps many people have lost interest in the passion to vote people into office if your votes don't count. But in the general sense, if you know you are not going to vote, there is no reason for you to go and collect PVCs, because these are very expensive items which were all budgeted for. And then you sit down, and then you complain when the person you don't want emerges the leader of your country. So we should enlighten people on the need to go and vote. But I have not seen that bill and what it all contains. I have read it like any other person. But if it's about jailing people for refusing to vote, I will not support it as far as concerned. Let's do a lot in terms of educating and encouraging people to go and vote. And by the time people see that when they vote, it's counted and it also matters in the voting process, many people will be encouraged to go and vote. I don't vote jailing or arresting people for not voting.
Well, on that note, Senator Shehu Sani, I would like to thank you very much for joining us on This Day Live, this Sunday Talk Show. Thank you very much indeed.